Hello lords and ladies of the internet, I'm the King of Candor, and today we'll be discussing the history of Rakshasas in fantasy. Now, Rakshasas are a staple of D&D, with a particularly memorable one in Season 1 of Critical Role. Modern Rakshasas are described as tiger-headed demons with backwards hands. These backward hands are sometimes shown with the thumb upside down, or simply with the fingers bending in the other direction, as shown in this art. They also tend to have a lot of magical powers, specifically focusing on illusion magics and other mind-altering abilities. Rakshasas originate in India, and if you took this description to a local Indian, they would actually be very confused. This would be like me describing a tall, red-horned beast that can breathe fire and has pointed ears, but naming it an elf. Now, before I can explain what Rakshasas are like in India, you should like and subscribe. Also, share the video to help the channel grow. Now, on to India. Rakshasas have many vague stories about their origins, all claiming a link back to some divinity or different gods and goddesses being their parents. Regardless of their parentage, Rakshasas are often the villains in these stories. They haunt graveyards, steal children, they can possess you when you eat bad food, and they're obstacles for heroes to overcome. In fact, the name can be best translated as "to be guarded against," which should help you picture their place in Indian mythology. Most tales about Rakshasas are wives' tales or local stories passed on orally. However, we do have a better explanation of them elsewhere. Rakshasas do appear in the foundational myths of India, though, the Ramayana and Mahabharata. These are two Indian epics. Think the Iliad and the Odyssey level of importance. These works are a collection of stories, with Rakshasas appearing as characters who often battle the heroes. However, in these tales, not all Rakshasas are evil. Some can actually be good. But most are still evil, and their evil natures are often focused on more in the modern retellings. Focusing on the Ramayana, we see these Rakshasas as mostly evil, being the main antagonists for books 3 through 6, and a constant threat for the protagonist, Rama. Here, they are powerful warriors, who also have great shape-shifting powers. They even have complex societies, though, with some Rakshasas possibly leading normal lives in their kingdoms. The brother of the king of one of these kingdoms is actually a morally righteous Rakshasa. This king kidnapped Sita, the wife of Rama, and intended to keep her as his own. The king's brother, the good Rakshasa, then defected to Rama's army to help him save Sita. Now in the Mahabharata, Rakshasas are way more human-like, being closer to cannibals than literal demons. The main Rakshasa of the tale actually sends his sister to kill the hero Bhima, but they actually fall in love. Eventually Bhima kills this Rakshasa, but then has a child with his new Rakshasa wife. This child is also a Rakshasa, and later aids his father in the Mahabharata war, which is a dynastic struggle between different cousins for control of the kingdom. This epic war is noted for having Rakshasas on both sides, with them being fierce warriors skilled in illusion magics. So what do these Rakshasas actually look like? Honestly, they don't really have any consistent descriptions outside of being vaguely human with extra long teeth. They also have been described as having poisonous fingernails, but I think that's a mistranslation and it should be better thought of them as claws. These Rakshasas are good fighters and very capable magic users. Shapeshifting is a favorite ability of all of them, with it constantly popping up in all their tales. They use these tricks and disguises to get what they want, such as shapeshifting into food to enter someone's mouth to possess them, or into a beautiful maiden to lure a man for sacrifice. Rakshasas have been used in several minor stories throughout the years, but the first major uses of Rakshasas I could find is in Dungeons & Dragons, way back in 1st edition, as a supplemental monster in the magazine called The Strategic Review. This is the precursor to Dragon magazine for any of you who aren't fans of it. At the time that they are introduced, they're given a very vague description. It says they're from India, they love eating human flesh, and they can shapeshift. The article also says only high-powered magic items can harm them, but a crossbow bolt blessed by a cleric will destroy them instantly. The magazine's free and it's actually linked below if you wish to read it. There's a fun article in there about SS troopers fighting a troll. So, where did the designers get this information from? Nowhere in Indian mythology does a blessed crossbow bolt kill them. Well, it's actually from an old TV show called Kolchak, the Night Stalker. As you can see from the forum post on the screen, Gary Gygax himself explained the inspiration and its origins. Now, Rakshasas are noted as great illusionists and shapeshifters. On the illusionist front, Rakshasas have always had magic powers and could cast spells, even when they were briefly mentioned in the strategic review. From here, their full release would focus more on their illusions and magics. Then, D&D wanted to illustrate their shapeshifting abilities when the Rakshasa got a full release in the Monster Manual. For this, artist David Trampier drew this. He combined the things that he first thought about when thinking of India and a creature who eats men: a classy gentleman and a tiger. Now, Rakshasa have their iconic tiger head. They do also have other heads at this time, but this is the first instance of a tiger head being tied to Rakshasas. So this is where most explanations of Rakshasas stop. However, we're still missing one key feature of Rakshasas: their backward hands. Hundreds of blog posts have been written confused about the origins of the hands, with no answer in sight. However, I believe I have found the answer. The first time we see Rakshasas with these backwards hands is in this image here, from Dragon Magazine, issue 84. Notice, this Rakshasa looks more like an ape. Like I said earlier, their tiger forms were not yet solidified. The text underneath the picture describes it as such. This version of the Rakshasa has a big belly, fingers that curve away from the palms of his hands, and claws that are said to be poisonous. This text underneath the picture also directly states their source: Funk and Wagnall's Standard Dictionary of Folklore, Mythology, and Legend. I actually tracked this book down and found the description where it has Rakshasas possessing 5 feet and fingers that are on backwards. Now we have the strange reverse hands from the Rakshasa. Note, in this description, I think the original authors were trying to describe a cat's claw, where the fingers curl back, allowing the claws to extend. This would line up with previous Rakshasa descriptions of them having claws. This article also goes into detail about how Rakshasas really like their illusion magic and how they hide in human society. From here, every version of Rakshasas I could find was tied back to D&D, even a lot of the versions from Japanese sources. Some of the versions do not have the reverse hands, but almost every one I see keeps them as demonic catmen. This goes from Supernatural to American Gods by Neil Gaiman. I also find them criminally underutilized outside of D&D. The best depiction of a Rakshasa I could think of was from Critical Role, and I won't spoil anything for those who haven't seen it yet. I also do want to give a shout out to Far Cry 4. The dream sequence has them as enemies there. The trippy Shangri-La scenes use them as the primary foe, with Rakshasas being blue-skinned and wearing face masks. Their hands, however, are normal, and I think this is because it's pulled directly from India without the influence of Dungeons & Dragons. In my home game, I also had a Rakshasa show up once. The players learned of a criminal organization selling drugs in their home city. They tracked down the guy in charge of the drug dens to a noble who had recently moved to this city. A fight broke out with the noble's illusion magic failing him and revealing him to be a Rakshasa in disguise. He then was slain by my players. Demons in my setting can only be killed if you travel to hell and kill them there, or bind their spirits to earth and kill them here. Otherwise, when slain, they simply reform in hell. This Rakshasa did that and eventually returned. He then disguised himself as a merchant and hired the PCs to guard a boat he was traveling on. He lured them below deck, locked the door, and sank the ship. Before he could finish him, though, one of the players broke free, and they all fought him and killed him again on the sinking ship. It was a pretty cool fight. At this point, my players got tired of this guy and decided to find a way to permanently kill him. They couldn't go to hell directly, so they got a magic item which would allow demons to be bound here, and they waited for him to return. Months go by, and eventually they're at this fancy ball. One of the players was wooing a female bartender NPC, so he took her as his date. At some point, she mysteriously got sick and went to the restroom. This was the Rakshasa casting a spell on her to force her to go there. While she was in the restroom, he disguised himself as her and asked the player if they could go home immediately. When they were alone, the Rakshasa killed the player. The only reason he was saved was because the player had an item that alerted the party healer when one of them was knocked unconscious or was killed. The healer quickly burst into the room, revived the dead player, D&D magic is very broken. They then battled the Rakshasa, eventually killing him forever. Don't worry, I have Rakshasas in my upcoming game Enos. And actually, why don't you all tell me about your homebrew games and the Rakshasas you have down below. That's all for today. Thank you all for watching this far. If you enjoyed the content, I'd appreciate if you liked and subscribed. I'm looking forward to your candor and your comments below, and have a great day.